The ordinary morning at the Seattle Metropolitan Medical Center was shattered by the appearance of two sturdy Alaskan Malamutes outside the glass automatic doors. They whined, their large paws scratching desperately at the glass. Their thick fur was caked with mud, and their powerful forelegs were pressed against the cold panel. Their intelligent, focused eyes were pleading for help. Everyone assumed they were just hungry strays, but a sharp-eyed nurse noticed something strange. Right behind the dogs was a crumpled black plastic bag, its corner torn, and it was moving. Dr. Ethan Cole, the physician exhausted from his night shift, rushed to the door, driven by a confused curiosity. What was inside that bag? Who could have predicted what was about to unfold? It wasn't trash. It wasn't food. It was something no one could have imagined. The story of what these two brave Malamutes had dragged across the streets would soon bring the entire hospital to tears. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city, casting a soft, golden glow through the hospital windows. Inside, the corridors were quiet, the only sounds the faint humming of machinery and the squeak of nurses' shoes on the polished floor. It was the calm, peaceful start to a typical day. Doctors exchanged weary greetings, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the small cafeteria near the entrance. Dr. Cole straightened his white coat and took a deep breath. Fatigue etched shadows under his eyes, but he found a strange comfort in this familiar routine. A quiet morning like this was a blessing before the usual flood of emergency patients. He walked toward the reception desk, flipping through patient charts. He had no idea that this peace would be broken in the most unexpected way just minutes later. Nurse Sarah Chen handed him his daily schedule. "Quiet morning, doctor," she smiled gently. Cole nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "Let's hope it stays that way." The words would soon resonate with an ironic heaviness in his mind. Outside, something was stirring beyond the sliding glass doors, but no one had noticed yet. The early morning at the hospital's main entrance was usually empty, save for the occasional taxi dropping off a patient. But this morning, two furry shadows moved along the pavement. They were powerful Alaskan Malamutes, already exhibiting an imposing presence despite their relative youth. Their dense, dark fur was matted with street grime, but their amber eyes were sharp with intelligence and alertness. They whined and sniffed anxiously, searching for something. Inside, Dr. Cole continued reviewing charts, oblivious to the small miracle about to erupt before him. The wall clock ticked rhythmically, counting down the seconds until fate arrived. Then, the sound came. At first, it was faint, a sharp scratching on glass. Nurse Chen frowned. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Cole looked up and listened. The scratching again. Then, a high-pitched whimper. It was coming from the main entrance. He set down his cup, curiosity replacing the fatigue in his eyes. "That's odd," he murmured, walking toward the glass doors. The sight that greeted him made him gasp. Two large, powerfully built Alaskan Malamutes were standing on their hind legs, forepaws pressed against the glass door. Their gaze held not just desperation, but a surprising resolve, an intelligence that seemed to know exactly what they needed to do. Dr. Cole froze for a moment, wondering if his eyes were deceiving him. Their fur was disheveled and muddy, but their big, pleading brown eyes held something more than fear. It was an urgency. Nurse Chen came up beside him, gasping in surprise. "Oh, you poor things." They looked terrified. One of the Malamutes pressed its nose to the glass, fogging it with its warm breath, and let out a pained whimper. The other gave a short, sharp bark, as if calling for help. Cole frowned and stepped closer. With a soft whoosh, the automatic door slid open. The two dogs took a step back when they saw him, then immediately stepped forward again, as if trying to lead him somewhere. "Hey, it's all right," he said gently, crouching down. The smaller dog tilted its head and produced a thin, plaintive sound that sounded tragically like a human groan of distress. That's when something behind them caught his attention. A few feet away on the ground lay a crumpled black plastic bag. Its top was tightly tied, but one corner was torn open. Cole blinked. "What is that?" he muttered. The two dogs immediately turned toward the bag, their tails rigid, and barked agitatedly, their bodies shaking. Nurse Chen followed his gaze. "Just some trash, I'm sure," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The dogs certainly weren't acting like they were guarding garbage. They seemed to be pointing him toward something important. Cole stood up, his physician's instincts kicking in. "I'm going to check," he said quietly. The two Malamutes carefully backed away a few steps, watching him intently, waiting for him to understand. The air outside was cold and still. The dogs circled the black bag, whimpering anxiously. Cole felt the tension in the air, a strange weight settling on his chest. He moved slowly toward the bag that had, somehow, led these small creatures to his door. "Something is wrong." He exchanged a look with Nurse Chen. Call security, he said quietly. And stay close. As Dr. Cole approached the black plastic bag, every instinct told him that something was terribly amiss. A light morning breeze brushed past his face, carrying a faint, unpleasant smell. He slowly crouched down, scrutinizing the torn corner of the bag. The Malamutes cried louder, circling the bag as if urging him on. Nurse Chen stood a few feet back, clutching her cell phone. "Should I call a janitor?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Cole shook his head. "Not yet." He leaned forward cautiously, noting that the bag felt heavier than it looked. Something inside the bag shifted, a minuscule movement, causing the plastic to make a slight crackling sound. He froze. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Chen's eyes widened. It moved. Silence descended for a moment. Even the Malamute stopped barking. Cole slowly reached out, touching the plastic with his fingertips. It was cold, but the contents weren't entirely still. He felt a weak, slow, irregular motion. Like breathing. His heart began to pound faster. "Doctor, what if it's an animal?" Chen whispered. Cole nodded slowly, but his gut told him it was something else. "Maybe," he said, the word meant more to reassure her than himself. Deep down, he sensed a different presence, a fragile, helpless one. He looked back at the two dogs. They sat side by side, ears pricked, not taking their eyes off him, their small chests heaving quickly. They seemed to understand the urgency more than anyone. Cole took a deep breath and started to undo the knot at the bag's opening. The knot resisted slightly, then popped loose. A faint sound escaped. So tiny, almost inaudible. He froze again, leaning in closer. It was a whimper. But not a puppy's whimper. Nurse Chen gasped. "Oh my God. That's not an animal sound." She covered her mouth with her hand. Cole's pulse quickened further. "Get me gloves," he said, his voice urgent. "Now." Breathing shallowly, he squinted and gently pulled open the mouth of the bag. The Malamutes whined and moved closer. And then he saw it. Something small and pale, wrapped in a thin layer of cloth. Dr. Cole's heart rate spiked. He slowly stood up. The faint sound from the bag remained, fragile and unmistakably human. He looked toward the hospital doors. Several early patients, alerted by the commotion, were starting to gather. "Everyone step back," he ordered sternly. His tone allowed for no questions. The two Malamutes stood alert, their eyes darting constantly between the doctor and the bag. One barked a short, sharp cry, placing a paw on the black plastic as if to say, "Please, help." Cole swallowed hard. He had dealt with countless emergencies in his career, accidents, heart attacks, critical births. But never this. Nurse Chen returned with gloves and a small flashlight. "Here, doctor." Her hands were shaking slightly. Cole pulled on the gloves and crouched down again. The scent was faint but distinct, plastic mixed with damp cloth. He gently touched the bag again, feeling the weak movement inside. "Stay calm," he told himself, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. His gaze lifted and met the eye of the nearest Malamute. The dog whined softly, as if understanding. Cole took a deep breath and opened the bag completely. Underneath layers of old cloth was something that squeezed his chest. "A baby," Chen whispered, her voice breaking, tears welling up. "Oh my God, doctor, it's a baby." Cole's eyes were wide, a tiny finger twitched, then went still. "Stretcher!" he yelled, his voice echoing in the morning air. Panic spread through the small crowd, but the doctor's focus was absolute. He carefully reached in and lifted the frail body, wrapped in a torn white blanket. The two puppies began to bark again, this time not from fear, but from relief, their tails giving weak wags. As Cole rushed inside, cradling the newborn to his chest, one of the dogs even tried to follow. He glanced back for a brief moment, seeing them through the glass doors. Their faces were pressed against the window, their eyes pleading, as if they knew their mission wasn't finished. The hospital corridor filled with the sound of Dr. Cole's feet running, holding the small bundle tight to his chest. "Clear the way," he shouted. Nurses instantly reacted, recognizing the tone in his voice, a tone that meant life and death hung in the balance. He placed the small, motionless infant on a nearby examination table. The baby was pale, lips slightly blue. The thin cloth clung to its tiny body. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Then, a weak, trembling moan broke the silence. "She's breathing," Chen whispered, tears streaming down her face. Cole leaned in. Despite the rush of adrenaline, his hands were steady. "Pulse present," he muttered, checking the baby's neck. "Heart rate weak. Too weak." He turned to the nurses. "Oxygen kit and warm blankets, fast." Within seconds, a small emergency team was in place. The air filled with the rhythmic beeping of activated machines and the faint hiss of oxygen. Sarah Chen gently swaddled the baby in a soft towel, whispering words of comfort, slowly rubbing its back in circles as if it could hear her. Outside the glass doors, the two Malamutes still hadn't moved. They sat with their backs straight, two motionless shadows against the window, watching every moment without blinking. Their bodies shivered from the cold, but they wouldn't leave. Every few seconds, one would whimper softly, the sound somehow piercing the clinical silence of the treatment room. Cole's eyes briefly met theirs, then returned immediately to the baby. "Hold on, little one," he said quietly. He placed a stethoscope on the small chest. "Weak, but still there. Increase the oxygen flow slightly," he instructed. Minutes felt like hours. The baby's breathing slowly grew stronger, and a hint of color began to return to the skin. And then, suddenly, a high-pitched cry echoed in the room. A strong, tiny, beautiful cry. The nurses froze for a moment, then erupted in relieved smiles. "She's crying," Chen said, her voice shaking with joy. Dr. Cole let out a deep breath, the tension leaving his shoulders. "All right," he whispered. "She's stable now." Outside, the dogs barked again, their joyous cries ringing down the corridor like a hymn. Cole looked back at them, a slight smile on his face. "They brought her here," he said quietly, almost to himself. "They saved her," and though no one could explain how or why it happened, everyone in that room was certain of one thing: those two brave Alaskan Malamutes had accomplished something colossal. The baby's cries echoed through the emergency room, fragile, but alive. A sound that brought a wave of relief to everyone present. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Nurses exchanged glances, some covering their mouths, others blinking back tears. It wasn't just the shock of finding a baby in a trash bag. It was the realization that life had clung to hope in an unbelievable way. Dr. Cole stood motionless for a moment, his gloved hands hovering over the baby. The small body was covered in grime, the skin pale, the tiny fingers weakly clenched. "Severe dehydration," Cole said quietly. "And malnourished. Only a few days old." His voice trembled as he spoke. Sarah Chen put a hand to her chest. "How could anyone?" She trailed off. Cole didn't answer. He had seen tragedy before, but this was different. This was deliberate abandonment. He gently stroked the baby's cheek with a finger. The skin was cold to the touch, but the baby turned its face slightly, reacting to the warmth as if struggling to live. He looked up at his team. "Prep the incubator," he commanded. "We are not losing her." Outside, the two Malamutes continued to sit by the glass doors, watching intently. Their heads tilted with every sound the baby made. They seemed to refuse to leave until they were certain their mission was complete. One whined softly, pressing its nose to the glass. "They haven't moved an inch," Chen said softly. Cole followed her gaze, feeling a lump form in his throat. "They know," he said quietly. "Somehow, they just know." The nurses quietly exchanged glances, each trying to process what they had witnessed. The idea of two Alaskan Malamutes dragging a baby all the way to the hospital seemed impossible. Yet, it happened right before their eyes. Minutes later, a police officer arrived, taking notes as he spoke with Dr. Cole. "The dogs brought the baby?" the officer asked, unable to hide the skepticism in his voice. Cole nodded firmly. "Yes. Without them, we would have been preparing for a tragedy instead of saving a life." The officer glanced toward the doors where the two dogs sat silently, their eyes fixed on the baby inside. For a moment, even he couldn't hide the emotion on his face. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "They're heroes." The room once again became a flurry of activity. Nurses moved quickly, preparing equipment, while Dr. Cole remained beside the baby, his concentration unwavering. Every second was precious now. The infant's breathing was shallow and weak, like a candle flame flickering in the wind. "Temperature?" Cole demanded. 35 degrees, dropping, Chen replied. "Get that incubator ready now," he commanded. The medical team worked as one, the urgency filling the sterile air. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell erratically, the faint beep of the heart monitor sounding like a distant countdown. Cole leaned in closer and whispered, "Come on, little one. You made it this far. Don't give up." Outside the glass wall, the two Malamutes were still inseparable. They huddled by the door, fogging the glass with their noses, sitting with wide, worried eyes. Every time the baby made a sound, they whimpered softly, their tails twitching anxiously. A hospital security guard tried to shoo them away, but they refused to budge, as if an invisible thread bound them to the child. Minutes dragged on like hours. Cole adjusted the oxygen mask and rechecked the pulse. "Pulse is improving," he finally said, his voice still cautious. Chen handed him a warm blanket. She's fighting, doctor. She wants to live. Cole nodded, his eyes never leaving the baby. She's not alone, he muttered, glancing toward the window where his two little heroes faithfully waited. Suddenly, the monitor emitted a high-pitched alarm. The baby's heart rate plummeted. Panic erupted in the room. Code blue. A nurse yelled. She will not die today. Cole roared, steel in his voice. He began chest compressions, his hands surprisingly gentle, yet filled with urgency. Seconds passed, and then another sound broke the silence, a weak cry. Everyone froze. The baby cried again, louder this time, and a tiny hand twitched. Relief washed over the room like sunlight through the clouds. Chen burst into tears. She's back. Outside, as if sensing the miracle, the two Malamutes let out a chorus of sharp barks, their tails wagging wildly. The sound was pure joy. Dr. Cole finally exhaled and leaned back. We did it, he whispered. And then he looked toward the door, where two small faces were still watching him. No, he said quietly, smiling through his exhaustion. They did. The baby was stable, but barely. The tiny chest rose and fell with effort. Each breath was a battle between life and silence. The incubator hummed softly, radiating gentle warmth onto the small body. Monitors beeped in a regular rhythm around the baby. Every sound was a reminder that hope was still alive, but exhausted. Dr. Cole sat beside the incubator, his eyes fixed on the baby. His hands, always steady in crisis, were now trembling slightly. He had saved many lives, but this baby, and the manner of her discovery, had touched him deeper than anything he could explain. He wasn't just fighting for one patient now, he was fighting for the miracle that two brave creatures had refused to abandon. In the emergency area, the two Malamutes still hadn't moved. Hours had passed since their arrival, yet they remained in the same spot, keeping watch near the glass doors. Their bodies were curled up, but their ears were constantly alert. Occasionally, one would lift its head, listening for any sound from within. When the baby's weak cry echoed down the hall, both would whimper softly, their tails giving a small wag as if they understood what was happening. Nurse Chen looked through the glass and sighed. They're still out there, doctor, she whispered. Haven't eaten, haven't moved since morning. Cole looked toward the door, his expression softening. Keep them warm, he said quietly. They've done more than most humans would. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the machines. The baby stirred weakly, a finger twitched, and the lips parted slightly as if seeking comfort. Cole reached into the incubator, gently placing his gloved hand near the baby's. It's all right, he murmured softly. You're not alone anymore. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, but he didn't wipe it away. Outside, the dogs lay huddled together, their breathing slow and regular, finally at rest, but still facing the door. Night fell over the city, and the hospital lights reflected dimly on the floor. In that small, sterile room, a doctor fought for a stranger's life. Outside, two small souls waited as the unexpected guardians of a child they had refused to abandon. The next morning, the atmosphere in the hospital felt different. The air was heavy with the memory of what had happened. Nurses spoke in whispers. Even the security guards occasionally glanced toward the glass doors, where the two dogs still waited patiently. Dr. Cole hadn't gone home. He sat beside the incubator. Dark circles lined his eyes, but his heart felt lighter than it had the night before. The baby was slowly, but surely, recovering. With every passing hour, her weak breathing grew stronger, her cries slightly louder. But one question hung in everyone's mind: why is this baby here? Nurse Chen quietly entered with a tray of tea. You should rest for a while, doctor, she said gently. Cole shook his head. No. Not until I know how she got here. Just then, David Miller, the elderly security guard, stood tentatively at the door. Doctor, I might know something, he said in a quiet, uncertain voice. Cole spun around. What is it, Dave? Miller shuffled in, wringing his hands nervously. I came in early yesterday, before sunrise. I was passing by the alley behind the hospital, and I saw a woman. She was standing near the dumpster, holding something. A black bag. Chen's eyes widened. The same bag. Miller nodded slowly. She looked frantic. She kept glancing around, then she just dropped the bag and ran. I thought she was just disposing of trash. A few minutes later, I saw those two Malamutes dragging that same bag. I didn't think much of it then. The room was silent. Cole stared at him, the truth dawning on him. You mean to say they dragged it all the way here? Miller nodded again. Yes, doctor. They struggled, but they wouldn't stop. When a car came close, one of them barked and stood over the bag, as if protecting it. Chen covered her mouth, tears sparkling in her eyes. They knew she was alive, she whispered. Cole looked toward the glass doors where the two small dogs were sleeping side by side. His chest tightened with emotion. They didn't just save him, he murmured. They wouldn't let the world ignore her. And in that quiet moment, everyone in the room felt that the line between instinct and love had never been so blurred. By the next day, the story had spread throughout the hospital. From the nurses' station to the ER, everyone was talking about the two dogs who had saved a baby's life. Even the usually composed doctors paused in the corridors, whispering and shaking their heads in disbelief. It was no longer just a story, it had become a symbol of hope. Dr. Cole watched from the window as hospital staff members began to trickle outside to see the small heroes. The two Malamutes still sat near the entrance, shyly wagging their tails whenever someone approached. A nurse placed a bowl of water beside them. Another brought scraps of bread. But even with food, their focus remained on the glass doors, as if their job was not yet complete. They've been out there since yesterday, Chen said quietly, standing next to Cole. It's like they're waiting for permission to rest. Cole gave a small smile. They're not waiting for permission, he said. They're waiting for her. The one they saved. As more people gathered in the reception area, a hush fell. Some took pictures, others just stared in awe. No one had ever seen a sight like this, two Alaskan Malamutes, known for their ruggedness, delivering life itself to safety. A nurse approached Cole, teary-eyed. Doctor, can we keep them here until they find a home? Cole looked at the dogs again. Their tails were wagging, their eyes gentle and trusting. No, he said quietly. This is their home now. For a moment, the hospital, usually filled with pain and urgency, felt different, lighter, warmer. A story of loss had been transformed into a story of love. And as the days went on, everyone who passed those two small heroes began to believe a little more in the inherent goodness of the world. By the afternoon, the story had spread beyond the hospital walls. A young resident had posted a short video online, two muddy Malamutes sitting outside the hospital door, gently wagging their tails, captioned, "These dogs saved a baby's life today." Within hours, the video went viral. News channels picked up the story. Reporters descended upon the hospital gates, and social media exploded with disbelief and emotion. People shared the story across platforms, calling it the miracle of the two strays. Outside the hospital, cameras flashed, and a cluster of microphones surrounded Dr. Cole as he stepped out to give a brief statement. He was not used to the spotlight, but this wasn't about him. He looked straight into the camera and said simply, "Two lives were saved today. One, the baby's life, and the other, perhaps, our faith in human kindness." The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then, applause erupted. The two Malamutes, oblivious to their newfound fame, sat near the entrance, blinking at the bright lights and curious faces. When a reporter crouched down to take their picture, one tilted its head curiously, and the other, weary from the two-day vigil, gave a big yawn. Chen stood nearby, letting out a small laugh. They have no idea they're heroes. Children came with food. Families brought warm blankets. Local animal shelters offered to take them in. But Dr. Cole politely declined. They will stay here for a while, he said. Until the baby recovers, this is their home. Inside the hospital, the baby, still fragile but recovering, had become a symbol of hope. Staff began to call her the miracle, but Cole had secretly chosen another name in his heart. That night, as the news aired nationwide, millions watched the footage, the trembling dogs, the torn black bag, the tearful staff. Comment sections were filled with messages: animals have bigger hearts than people, faith restored, angels in real life. In a world too quick to overlook compassion, two forgotten strays had reminded people of what true care meant. And as night fell on the city, the hospital lights shone gently. No longer just a beacon of healing, but a monument to two small souls who had taught humanity to love again. Night settled quietly upon the hospital. The cameras and the clamor of the crowd had vanished, leaving behind the steady sounds of machinery and the soft glow of the fluorescent lights. In the critical care unit, only the light above the incubator was lit. Inside, tiny baby Hope slept peacefully, her breathing now strong and regular. Dr. Cole stood beside her, arms folded. Fatigue was etched on his face, but for the first time in days, his mind was calm. He watched the baby's chest rise and fall, each breath a testament to life. A testament to hope being found in the most unlikely of places. Sarah Chen entered quietly with a mug of tea. "You haven't left her side since this morning," she said gently. Cole gave a small smile. "I can't," he whispered. To think what she went through, he looked down at the sleeping baby, his voice thick with emotion. When I first saw her, I thought we'd lose her before we even started. But she fought. She never gave up. Just like those two small souls outside. Through the glass wall, under the blanket someone had draped over them, he could still see the two Malamutes curled up near the entrance. Their small bodies rose and fell in the same slow, regular rhythm, finally at peace after their 2-day ordeal. Cole reached into the incubator, gently touching the baby's hand with his gloved finger. The tiny fingers instinctively wrapped around his. A lump formed in his throat. "You know," he murmured. "If it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be here. Somehow, those two Alaskan Malamutes became your angels." Chen's eyes welled up with tears. "She needs a name, doctor," she said softly. Cole looked at her, then back at the baby. "Hope," he said, after a moment's pause. "Because that's what they gave us. Hope, when we thought all was lost." For a moment, the room was wrapped in a sacred, silent calm. Cole stood straight, his eyes shining. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "We'll bring them inside. They deserve it." Outside, as if hearing his promise, one of the dogs stirred, lifted its head, and quietly wagged its tail. As if it understood. The next morning was clear and bright. The hospital grounds glittered with the dew that had fallen overnight. Outside the main entrance, the two Malamutes stretched, shaking the cold from their thick fur. They had watched and waited for 2 days. Dr. Cole walked out, holding a small paper bag. The two dogs' tails wagged furiously in joyous greeting when they saw him. He crouched down and placed 2 bowls. One with warm milk, the other with food. "A reward," he said softly. "My small heroes." The 2 dogs began to eat, occasionally looking up at him, their eyes filled with warmth and trust. Sarah Chen came up beside him, smiling. "They were waiting for you," she said. Cole nodded. "And perhaps I was waiting for them too." He gently reached out and scratched one behind the ear. "You brought life where death was almost certain," he murmured. "You deserve a better place than the street." By the afternoon, the paperwork was signed, the arrangements made. As hospital staff gathered near the reception counter, Dr. Cole carried the two Malamutes inside for the first time, not as trespassers, but as family. The room was filled with applause and smiles. Even the security guard who had once tried to shoo them away was secretly wiping a tear. "What will you name them?" a nurse asked. Cole smiled, looking down at the 2 dogs huddled at his side. "Angel," he said, pointing to the smaller one. "And Guardian." Because that's exactly what they were. That night, the 3 of them were in Cole's small office. The 2 dogs slept beside him, and Hope slept soundly in the sacred, peaceful room next door. For the first time in years, the doctor felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of fulfillment. Life had begun again, not just for the baby, but for all the people whose hearts had been moved by their story. 1 full year had passed since that unforgettable morning. The day 2 muddy Alaskan Malamutes dragged a black bag to the hospital door and changed countless lives forever. The Seattle Metropolitan Medical Center grounds were bathed in sunlight that afternoon, its gardens blooming with vibrant marigolds and roses. Laughter echoed in the courtyard, not the usual sterile sound of the hospital, but the sweet giggle of a 1-year-old. Hope sat on a soft blanket, her tiny hands reaching out to 2 familiar shadows, Angel and Guardian. The dogs were no longer small. They had grown into powerful, dignified Alaskan Malamutes, their thick, brown fur gleaming in the sun. But despite their size, their eyes held the same gentle affection they had shown on the day they saved her. Guardian rolled playfully beside her, allowing her tiny hands to playfully pull his ear, and Hope squealed with delight. Angel, ever the vigilant one, sat nearby, watching as always, his tail gently thumping the ground. Dr. Cole stood a few feet away, a wide smile on his face. He still remembered every detail, the black bag, the whimper, the race against time. And even months later, the memory was as vivid as yesterday. "You know," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "They're your angels. They found you when no one else cared." Hope looked at him, her eyes bright and her toothless smile wide, as if she understood every word. Nurse Chen approached, holding a small cake with a single candle shaped like the number 1. "Happy birthday, little miracle," she said warmly. As Cole lifted Hope into his arms, everyone in the garden applauded. Angel gave a bark, Guardian gave a bark, as if joining the celebration. It was a simple, perfect scene, a family built not by blood, but by fate and kindness. As the candle flickered in the breeze, Cole looked out at the nurses, the 2 loyal dogs, and the baby who connected them all. "Thanks to you," he whispered, smiling, "we all got to believe again." And as the laughter filled the air, the sun dipped lower, bathing the small family in a golden light. A symbol that a miracle, no matter how small, is never truly lost. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. The hospital garden glowed with quiet peace. Angel and Guardian lay near the bench, their tails moving rhythmically as Hope slept peacefully in Dr. Cole's arms. The world around them was hushed, as if time paused to honor this small, improbable family. Cole looked down at Hope's peaceful face, then at the two loyal dogs resting nearby. A faint smile touched his lips. "It's funny," he whispered. "A year ago, I thought I was saving a baby. But perhaps they were the ones who saved all of us." Sarah Chen stood beside him, her eyes shining. "That's right, Doctor," she said quietly. "They didn't just save one life. They reminded us what humanity is." The wind rustled the trees, carrying the gentle sounds of the city, a distant siren, a faint car horn, the echo of laughter far away. But in that moment, everything felt right. Cole gently placed Hope in her stroller and turned to the two dogs. "You found her when no one cared," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't run from the suffering. You ran toward it. Because love doesn't need words. It just needs courage." Angel lifted his head and quietly wagged his tail. Guardian barked softly, as if in reply. Cole smiled. "You are more than heroes," he said. "You're proof that compassion isn't limited to man, it's universal." As he walked back toward the hospital, the last rays of sunlight followed them, gilding their path. The camera of life would slowly pan over the scene, the doctor, the baby, and the two dogs walking side by side. Bound not by chance, but by destiny. And so, from one cruel act, a story of love was born. From the darkness came light. From two stray souls came a miracle no one would ever forget. Because sometimes, angels don't have wings, they walk on four paws.